Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is 7 sketchy things about Aries, and I actually did this video, posted it, had hundreds of views, and then somebody finally pointed out to me that it cut off. And the day that I recorded it was the first day of Mercury retrograde. So, you know, I guess I shouldn't be so surprised. And then, on top of that, I erased the file altogether, the original file on my phone. So I have to do this over again, which is fine. However, when I comprised another list, because I had also erased that, I realized that I wasn't going to have the same 7 items. I think 6 are the same, and I've changed the 7th, and I think it's going to be actually better in a way. You could keep going on, obviously. And the point of these readings is, first and foremost, entertainment value, because it's kind of fun. I'm a snarky person, and it's right up my alley. It's not meant to put anybody down. There are shadow aspects to every sign. I'm going to be doing every sign, so I'm not picking on a sign. And the other thing about this is it's not going to apply to every Aries person. So you may, if you're an Aries watching this about yourself, you may notice 1 or 2 things that kind of seem like they could be about you, but not all 7. And the other thing about this is that I want to also make it informative, where I kind of talk about how you can deal with these shadow aspects, whether it's you who have them or another person who has to deal with it. And sometimes why the person is acting like this. Like, what is the Aries person thinking? What is their motivation? And I deliberately did not say 7 sketchy things about Aries sun, because this could apply to the moon sign. This could apply to the rising sign or Mars in Aries, my goodness, because Aries is ruled by Mars. And so that would give the person a very forceful nature. And that's one of the things that I mentioned, being too bossy. So even if you don't have a sun in Aries, if you have another personal planet or personal point in Aries, you still may resemble these remarks in some way. So number 1, anger management issues. And this is probably the hallmark of Aries in terms of bad behavior. So Aries, and this could be the sun sign, but particularly the moon sign, because the moon is our emotional response. And the emotional response tends to be very reactive. I mean, that's what emotions are. They're reactions. You can have positive reactions, but with Aries being a very spontaneous sign, if they get pissed off, they may erupt like a volcano on steroids. And they may blow over very quickly. It's not like this kind of a thing where if an Aries person blows their stack, then they're sulking for like a week later. Maybe, I don't know what sign would do that. Maybe a Scorpio or something. Maybe they would never even like fully erupt if they were a Scorpio. They would just simmer like kind of in this very dark kind of a place. And with Aries, everything is up front. And what you see is what you get. And that is actually one of their best qualities. But when it comes to anger, it's the same thing. So it's like a 2-year-old. When a 2-year-old doesn't get what it wants, it's their face gets red and they start to pitch a fit. And that's kind of what happens to Aries. Their face gets red, and it might even match their hair being red, and they pitch a fit. Now, this can give Aries a reputation for being emotionally immature. Again, this is the shadow aspect. Not all Aries people are this out of control when it comes to displaying anger. Some Aries people, especially if they have Taurus personal planets, and the moon can be any sign, and so can the rising sign, depending on what day it is. The rising sign can be any sign, but the moon sign does stay in one sign for 2 days, so that's not entirely true. But in any case, it doesn't just have to be in signs that are close to the sun. That's what I meant to say, like Mercury, Venus, and Mars to a lesser degree. Oh, I didn't need to get that into it. But anyway, the point being that there are some Aries people who have more self-control than others. But it is kind of a pitiful sight to see somebody who's grown, who is acting so immaturely. One thing to note, if you are dealing with somebody like this who's a hothead, is not to allow them to intimidate you. Now, granted, we're talking about yelling. If somebody is physically threatening or actually violent, then obviously you shouldn't interact with that type of person anyway. But I'm not suggesting that Aries people are going to be violent at all. I'm saying that they tend to get very heated when they get angry. And in some ways, I think this is an intimidation tactic, a bullying tactic to get their way. And this is why you have to stand up to such a person. You don't stand up to them by screaming back at them, but by being the adult in the room and by calmly telling them that you're not changing your stance just because they get upset. And so that's one thing. The second thing is for the Aries person who may have this tendency to lose their cool like this. Meditation is very helpful for that. As I mentioned in my original video, there are studies about what meditation does, and not being a sciencey kind of person, I can't really speak on it in an impressive way, except to say that I think it's the frontal lobe or something, I don't know. But someplace that deals with impulsive behavior, that the positive effect of meditation is to kind of quell that and make the person a lot less impulsive. And this actually gets to my next point, which is impatience. And I'm going to put impulsive along with that because the impulsivity is due to impatience. Okay, this is number 2 of the sketchy things about Aries. By the way, the word sketchy is just to be funny. It's, sketchy to me means underhanded, but this is more just like the shadow aspects, obviously. I think everyone gets that, but, anyhow, impatience is something that I think most people experience from time to time, but this is just very commonplace for Aries. They always want to get there already. They always want to experience something when they want to experience it. They don't like to wait around, whether it's getting somebody, if they're waiting for somebody to make a decision about something, they may hound the person to push them. And, some people don't like to be pushed. If an Aries person is dealing with a Taurus person, they're going to hear from the Taurus person eventually, because Taurus people do not like to be pushed by others and rushed. And Aries is all about rushing. They hate to wait in line. They may try to, I don't know if any Aries people, if you've ever tried to cut in line, write it down below if you dare. I think about when you're like 10 years old, though, not when you're an adult. But yeah, that sense of like, come on, get on with it. And this quality can irritate other people, but for them, it can really cause them to make bad decisions if they indulge in this. Again, meditation is a key to that. And if you're dealing with somebody who's trying to push you because they're impatient, tell them, patience is a virtue. You need to chill. I need time to decide what I'm going to do. If you can't handle it, move on. I'm not willing to be impatient just because you are and make a decision that I may later regret. So number 3 is their horny nature. And Aries is ruled by Mars, the god of war, but Mars is also our libido. So when we're talking about astrology, we have the divine lovers. We have Venus and we have Mars. Now, Venus is the hearts, the flowers, the poems, the romantic side of love. Mars is physical attraction and the libido. And the thing about it, some people may say, well, what does love got to do with it? If somebody is lusting after somebody. Well, in general, especially if you're talking about a male-female relationship in particular, and we're talking about Venus and Mars, we're talking about the male-female dynamic here. Of course, same-sex unions can also display these characteristics, but I'm speaking sociologically here. Men, or maybe it's like physiologically, men tend to be very visually stimulated, and that's just a fact. And so they may fall in love with a woman, but there is that physical component as well, at least initially. And you see it in nature that one sex, or should I say gender, I don't know what's appropriate for animals, but I believe that the peahen is drab and the peacock, the male, is really flashy, And it's hilarious how one of them is drab and the other one is really, and sometimes it's the male that is styling and the female is very drab. So the point is that it's that attraction. There's both that the magnetism is on different levels, and one of them is a physical level. That's fine. That's nature, and that is also on the spiritual level. It may be that way as well, that we are meant to be physically attracted to specific people so that we fulfill our destiny with them. Okay? So I'm not talking about, being a Puritan. I'm talking about having an excessive sex drive. And this can wreak havoc on a relationship. I believe that there are some Aries out there who are very clean cut in a lot of ways. They don't get high, they don't get drunk, but their one vice, if you will, is they love sex. Again, nothing wrong with that behavior, but being, excessive preoccupation can lead to problems in relationships. And again, maybe even problems in choosing the right partner. I think that happens to Aries as well. So they lust after somebody and they think, wow, I'm in love. No. You can definitely have a situation where you're physically attracted to somebody, but you're not really meant to be with that person as a couple. So if you're dealing with somebody, an Aries person like this, who is kind of demanding about sex, it could be a spouse, you need to stand your ground and say that it has to be a mutual thing. Don't allow them to bully you. Okay. And it's interesting because I don't think that Aries is one of those signs, that is prominent in cheating, even though they may have a higher sex drive than some other signs. I think they're very above board. Obviously they're going to be outliers. It's just that this is what they have in their nature. Okay. Number 4, likes novelty. Oh, and I was going to say, for, the Aries who's overly sex, take a cold shower. So number 4, I put likes novelty, doesn't finish what he or she starts. And this is the one that I didn't include in the first video. And I think this is important because Venus and Aries can definitely fall into this trap. I always say that Aries is like the kid an hour after Christmas morning, after they open their presents, they're like, now what? They've been anticipating something, very enthusiastic, and then they get bored very quickly. I think I should have put that too, gets bored very quickly. And that's what liking novelty means, is that you always want that new stimulation. And the problem is that life is about all of us having that rhythm and that sense of continuity. When you're always looking for the new and you're not nourishing what you have, it's hard to lay down roots. It's hard to develop meaningful relationships that have great depth. And that's something about Aries too I could have put, and maybe I'll just include that here, is with not finishing what you start and wanting to do a new project. This is because Aries is a cardinal sign, and it's the first sign. It's a fire sign. There's a lot of enthusiasm at the beginning of a project, but not necessarily follow through. Again, if the Aries person has Mars in Taurus, for instance, they will be a beast. They'll have the best of both worlds. But if they have Mars in Gemini, God help them. And I'm being a little bit facetious, but Gemini likes novelty too. So that stick-to-itiveness isn't necessarily present with Aries, because once they get bored, they're not interested in whatever it is, and that includes relationships. So what I would say to Aries is, when you're going to get into a relationship, make sure that you really honor your needs. And if your needs are that you need to be kept on your toes, then that's what you need to do. I think about Warren Beatty, and maybe if you're under a certain age, you don't even know who that is. But he was like the heartthrob. He was like the Brad Pitt. I can't stand using Brad Pitt as the standard of a hot guy, because to me, these other people, I don't know, had more gravitas, but I don't know about Warren Beatty. I don't think he had much gravitas. But anyway, he was like very big in, I would say, the 70s. And he's Shirley MacLaine's brother and all that. Neither here nor there. But he was known as a big womanizer, and he was an attractive guy. Oh, one of my favorite movies is Splendor in the Grass, and that's 1962. So it's an early movie with Natalie Wood. So if you haven't seen that, go see that. And he was the guy in that, very cute, and that was her love. And it's a very sad movie, but the point being that he was, he's a very charming person, and a lot of ladies liked him, and he dated a lot, but he was known as kind of a horn dog, I think. And now he's with Annette Bening. Now, I'm assuming that, they're monogamous to one another, but I don't hear about him in the tabloids anymore. It's kind of like Mick Jagger. I mean, Mick Jagger's still doing his thing, and but he's a Leo. That's another story for another day. We'll get to Leo soon enough. The point being that he found somebody who fascinated him enough that he didn't need to keep being a horn dog. And by the way, Annette Bening is a Gemini, perfect for an Aries, to keep them on their toes. So if you're that type of an Aries who you get bored easily in relationships, don't lead people on, but also do not settle for less than what you need. And if this is a workplace situation where you find that you don't have much follow through, find an earth sign or somebody who exhibits a lot of stick-to-itiveness, and let them be your partner and let them do the grunt work. And you can be the person who comes up with these amazing new ideas, and you implement them, and you enjoy that, being the catalyst for things. And then the other person takes over with the mundane, day-to-day tasks. If you're somebody who is dealing with somebody like this, don't nag them. Either accept them as they are or move on, because this is kind of like how they are. And there's nothing wrong with enjoying one phase of a project. You don't have to, be everything to everybody, but you do have to have a certain understanding of who you are. And if you're dealing with somebody who is like this, you have to accept people how they are in this moment. You can't just expect that they're going to change because you're nagging them to. Number 5, too self-centered. And this is true of all fire signs. I plead guilty of this myself because I'm a Sagittarius. The fire signs are very interested in creative self-expression in whatever way feels right for them, and including just their life itself can be this work of art in a sense, where they are fascinated by the things that they're doing and they're enthusiastic. It's natural when you're enthusiastic to share it with other people. And they're coming from this place of the ego, but not necessarily a narcissistic type of an ego, just that sense of self. A lot of times I think people find fire signs off-putting because they find them kind of arrogant, because we may come across as, we know ourselves so well. And we, sometimes can be moralizing or, preachy to other people because we think that we have the right way to live or something along those lines. And that's, those are different topics for a different day. But the underlying thing about that is this sense of self and really interacting with oneself and wanting to promote it. And that's what creativity actually is. It's about kind of making tangible your soul's traits and other people picking up on that. And so if you're an Aries person, you have to make it a point to really be interested in other people. Ask them questions about their life. Don't just be absorbed in your own little drama. And wanting to always talk about yourself and act like you're the center of existence. Leo has a different way that they do this. Leo is more thinking that they are the center of the universe because they're ruled by the sun. So they think that they are paramount to everything in everybody's lives. Aries is just about me first, the first sign of the zodiac, wanting to be at the top of the heap. And this brings me to number 6, about being too competitive. But just if you're dealing with somebody who is an Aries person who exhibits self-centeredness, it's important to be very blunt about it, not rude. I mean, you can be straightforward without being rude, but just letting them know, you are saying this, you're talking about certain things, but you don't seem to be concerned about what makes me tick. It seems like it's all about you. And I really want us to be interacting back and forth. I don't want it to be a one-way street. And if the person is decent, they're going to, they might get a little bit defensive at first, but then they're going to want to accommodate you. So, and if not, then you have to make a decision whether you want to just listen to somebody else go on and on about themselves for the rest of your life. It's up to you. Free will. Number 6, too competitive. So, Aries is a natural fighter. God of war is what Mars, their ruler, is. So there's that warrior spirit. And I'm going to also add to this, even though it's not necessarily synonymous with it, but having a chip on their shoulder, thinking that they have something to prove to life, Aries, and this competitive nature is born out of an aggressive temperament. That's basically what it boils down to, is that Aries is very aggressive and they like competition. It's not that they don't like it. It's that they want life to be a competition. They want to be the victor, obviously, but there is this tendency to think of life in those terms. So how this can play out is that the Aries person can be way too competitive, and therefore it can mar relationships with other people. In personal relationships, they can feel jealous, or I should say, I think it's envious. Envious if their partner is doing better than them. If their partner makes more money, they may compare themselves all the time to other people. And it can, that kind of thing can really create havoc in your life. And likewise, in the workplace, it can be toxic. If a person creates a dog-eat-dog environment where everybody is pitted against each other, and God help, if the Aries person is in a position of authority, they may run their workers ragged, trying to compete with their, rival businesses of a similar nature, and that can lead to a very negative workplace. Law of attraction states that there's enough to go around and we don't have to compete. And I think of being competitive as being fear-based myself. And I find it very unpleasant. I can't say that I have zero competitive tendencies. That would not be a case. I always amaze myself when I get like that. I'm like, where is this coming from? It exists within me. I'm not an Aries. I'm a Sagittarian, but and I don't even have any. I don't think I have any Aries at all. And I don't like that part whenever I get like that. But it does exist. But I think that it's coming from conditioning more than actually within myself. So if you're an Aries person, remember that. Remember that there's enough to go around, that you don't have to compete, and that whatever is yours is meant to be. Obviously, do your best. Nobody's saying be a slacker and just mail it in, but do your best and leave it alone. And if you're somebody who is dealing with an Aries person who's too competitive, and there's nothing you can do to reason with them, then you may find that it's hard to work with such a person because they may poison the atmosphere. And the last thing, number 7 of the sketchy things about Aries, is being too bossy. And this is due to their cardinal nature, as well as being the fact that Aries is ruled by Mars. There's that tendency. Again, some of these other traits can also inform their bossiness: impatience, self-centered, competitive. If an Aries person is in a position of authority at work, which a lot of times they will be because they do not like to take orders, Aries people, being a cardinal sign, they like to be in positions where they give orders, and they might be a tyrant, or as Wayne Dyer said, a petty tyrant. Somebody who is not, being a good leader means that you really bring out the best in your employees and you're positive overall. If you have to criticize, you do so in a humane way. You're not trying to tear somebody down. You're not motivating them with fear, with intimidating tactics. And unfortunately, a lower expression of Aries might do just that. If you're working for this type of person, good luck to you, because you have to decide at some point whether or not you want to put up with that. All of us have the responsibility to put ourselves in positions that are comfortable for us, and to know when they're not, and to be able to honor that. And along those lines, you can't change another person. So you may say, it's not fair. I don't think that I should have to tolerate this person's behavior. But if you're, a lot of times that's their personality, and you have to either accept it or move on. If you are the Aries person, understand that you gain much more respect from employees if you treat them as autonomous beings. You do not use any kind of aggressive tactics to get them to produce, and you praise them on a regular basis, and are very and are not overly controlling. And in personal relationships, it's same thing. You have to be overall more positive than negative. And if you do have to point something out, not to be nasty about it, and to be diplomatic, because I could have said too that Aries tend to be very blunt in their speech. And this, again, is part of that impulsive or impatient part of them that just blurts things out without thinking sometimes. And it may be overly aggressive. It may not be very nice. So that can impact a relationship negatively. Okay, well, I think I'm going to leave it there, and I hope that you enjoyed this. This is the kind of in-depth analysis on personality traits that I do in my natal chart interpretations, as well as my love readings sometimes when I'm looking at people's charts and stuff like that. So please check out my website if this intrigues you. It's linked below. Take care. Bye.